Planet Earth, a complex interweaving of nature, humans, and the societies we have built, each one intricately dependent on the others. As the dominant species on Earth, every action we take has a profound and long-lasting impact on the planet's natural resources and ultimately our own quality of life. Understanding these actions and reactions is essential to navigating our consumption of resources so that we make the best of our resources and best of our lives. Today, we will learn about the science of understanding the impacts of individual, business, and government decisions about producing and allocating scarce resources among competing demands. Economics. This is Career Calling, and I'm your host, Pratibha Pandit. My guest today is an environmental economist, Jared Woollacott. Jared is a senior research economist at RTI International, an independent nonprofit institute that provides research, development, and technical services to government and commercial clients worldwide. Jared and his team of economists and scientists focus on research and development of economic models for energy and environmental problems, including air pollution, environmental policy, climate change impacts, and the distribution of these impacts. Jared holds an undergrad degree in economics and finance from Bentley University, master's degree in public policy and environment management from Duke University, and a PhD in Earth and Environment from Boston University. Jared shares with us what an economist's job entails and what it takes to be one. Hi, Jared. Welcome to Career Calling.
Hey, Pratibha. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
More ways than once. I think this is a very good time to learn about economics and discuss economics with what is happening around the world. I'm really looking forward to learning about your specific area, which is environmental economics research. But to begin, I want to start by getting some of the fundamental understanding of economics as an area of study. Economics is a study of availability of resources and the demand for it. Is that at a high level, is it a fair definition?
Yeah, I think that's a good one and a perfect place to start. Sometimes economics is called the dismal science. So you mentioned the availability of resources. Economists tend to say scarcity of resources. I think that reflects a certain point. But the key there, depending on and either way you're looking at it, is that scarcity or relative abundance of different resources, subject to the technologies we have at our disposal, forces us to make decisions and trade-offs. And whatever we do, we can't have all of the good things that we might like to have in the economy. We need to figure out which ones we value most and optimize for.
When I look at different college programs, or I've heard it in discussions or articles, this constant topic about pure economics and applied economics, and I never get my head wrapped around it. So what is the difference? Is there a difference at all when you get to working in that field and when you pursue that as a career?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think a lot of the work you see in professional settings tends to fall more in the applied economics realm. So pure economics tends to be reserved more for academia, folks that are developing new theories, new ways of thinking about the economy and the world through an economic lens. Whereas applied economics tends to take existing tools and methods from economics and apply them to real world problems and coming up with new ways to solve a problem with existing tools from economics.
Mm-hmm. And does research economics or economists, are they finding these new tools? Are they developing the science of economics or the area itself, or are they applying still? Tell me more about what does it mean to be a research economist?
Yeah, I think it's quite broad. I think that sort of title itself could encompass folks that are doing one or both of those two practices.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the work that I do, people that I work with in the consulting field, we tend to focus more on applied economics, but to some extent, we do develop new modeling techniques and approaches from time to time. But there's always a tension, I think, between the amount of time and effort you might put into developing something that's truly novel and getting it proven for use in applied setting versus wanting to get to solutions with existing and proven methods sooner, provide information that can inform a policy process, for example, or a business decision. You would much sooner do that with tools that are already established than develop something totally new.
Mm-hmm. Coming from a technology industry, I have seen many people with specializations in economics take jobs in technology industries, anywhere from being data scientists to all the way going into working in the finance departments. So how different is a private sector, if I may classify it that way, job where you're applying these models to something like your area where you're kind of looking at the overall global societal areas of the resources?
That's a good question. I spent a few years out of my undergrad in a more private sector focused consulting environment. I would say that work was a bit more applied. The work I do now is somewhere in between a sort of pure private sector and academic environment. We collaborate a lot with academics. I'll tell you a little bit about the type of work I do now as an environmental economist. I work for a firm called RTI International, and we focus primarily on consulting to the public sector. So the U.S. federal government and many different agencies, for example. So to your point, that tends to focus more on public problems, maybe bigger picture, looking at societal issues, rather than trying to dial into a single business decision, how to price a product or how to read shorter term signals in a particular market. At its core, though, I think there's a lot of overlap in the types of tools that are used that are coming from economics. And those tools can be applied quite broadly. In particular, econometrics, some discipline of economics, can be applied to just about any problem that you might face, because it's about using data to generate causal inference, to generate insight on a problem.
Let's dive deeper into your areas. It's very interesting when you say environmental economics. What are some of the types of problems you are looking at? How does economics apply to that?
Yeah. Now, environmental economics at its core is understanding how does the environment and the economy interact? How does the activity that goes on outside of the economic markets influence the value that we derive from the economy? So we look at things like pollution. We look at things like the value of natural resources that may not be priced, but come up with ways to understand how do we associate value to those natural resources, whether it's clean air or clean water or something else in the environment that's valuable to us. And then how do we make trade-offs, coming back to that core problem in economics of understanding how much do I value something tells me something about how much I'm willing to give up, whether it be monetary or otherwise, to hold it.
Who utilizes it? Like, is it something that gets commissioned by the governments because they want to kind of understand the overall country's economies around natural resources, or how does that work? Who utilizes this?
Yeah. So one example that some of your listeners might be familiar with is cost benefit analysis. And this is really at the crux of assessing trade-offs. You look at a given opportunity or option, whether it's maybe you're implementing a policy or a rule that's going to clean up the environment, it's pollution in some way. You want to look at the costs of imposing that rule. It'll be costly for businesses to limit their pollution. It'll drive prices up for consumers, potentially. And then you want to sum up the benefits associated with that. What benefit do we derive from having cleaner air? Are we going to be sick less often or have fewer cases of asthma, premature mortality? You can compare those two things. You can start to understand as a policymaker, is this a policy that's worth pursuing or not? And that's a common entry point for economics into the
Mhm.
policy process that we provide.
Mhm. Do most type of research economics tend to be public sector, or are there private sector use cases as well for that?
Yeah. So I'm less familiar with the private sector use cases. I will say the experience I do have there was right out of my undergrad program, which is economics and finance. I worked for an economic consulting firm named Analysis Group. And that firm focused on litigation cases primarily. And so
Mhm.
those were cases sometimes it would be between a class of shareholders and the management of an individual firm. Sometimes it would be disputes between different firms in a market. And applying economics in that setting required a bit of research, data collection, analysis of some attempt at causal inference in certain cases
Mhm.
that can tell you what caused the change in economic value for different parties in the market. So that's sort of a more private sector focus. We weren't really looking at issues of externalities. And they we use in economics for things that are going on outside the market, but in some ways are influenced by what's going on in the market. That's one example of a private sector application of economic research.
Application of economics are manifold. For example, environmental economics concerns with the study of natural resources and their consumption. Health economics focuses on the behaviors of consumptions and production of healthcare services and products. Labor economics seeks to study the dynamics of employment, wages, and their impacts on the markets. Behavioral economics looks at the psychological, cultural behaviors of individuals and businesses and their impact on the economy. The list goes on and on. But at the core, there are two main branches of economics: microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics focuses on understanding of the individual or a firm or a specific market's behavior in consumption and allocation of resources. For example, how does the demand of a product, such as, say, a cell phone, fluctuate in response to changes in price? Macroeconomics, on the other hand, focuses on behaviors and reactions of an economy as a whole, either nationally or even globally. For example, how does a country's economy react to increases in tax rates? Or what is causing inflation, that is, increase in prices of goods? To interpret why and how economy behaves and what is the best solution to influence or solve the economic phenomena, there are several economic theories in place. These are the set of ideas developed by prominent economists in the past on how economies behave. Economic tools are analysis methods that are utilized to explain different economic behaviors. Econometrics, a sub-branch of economics, utilizes mathematics, statistical methods to interpret, associate, and predict economic behaviors based on these theories quantitatively. No matter which branch of economics you will end up in, foundations are set by learning economic theories and analysis methodologies. Now, coming to the education side of it, in your bachelor's, you did economics and finance majors. And I noticed as you go to the grad program and to your doctoral program, you already started kind of branching out specifically to environmental thing. Tell me a little bit about it. How does those specializations work? Is it that you start specializing from the grad, and what are some of the options there? What are some of the possibilities?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a good opportunity to kind of retrace my steps. Sometimes careers unfold just as you planned them, and sometimes you realize the plan after that.
Yeah,
After you
always. I think
somewhere.
always.
I think I'm in the latter camp, as I think many are. I found that sort of after my undergrad program in my first years in private sector consulting, I really focused a lot on the development of analytical tools,
Mhm.
figuring out how to apply finance, apply economics, and I think that's true of a lot of career progressions that you first hone in on applying a given tool set very well. And in my case, and in the case of economics, that was a quantitative tool set. And then from that base of a really strong tool set, start to think next about what kind of applications are most captivating for you.
Mhm.
So now that you have a powerful tool in hand, you can look for places where you would like to apply that skill
Mhm.
set. That's kind of how things evolved for me, I think, coming out of that experience with a relatively strong sort of quantitative and analytical skill set. I was interested in understanding how the economy and the surrounding environment were interacting. So I started taking more and more coursework related to environment and energy, which is a major driver of pollution. And I got into economic modeling, which was kind of coming back around to a new tool set that I wanted to develop that was, really purpose fit for the types of applications I was most interested
Mhm. When you are going through grad and in doctoral, do you start also focusing on the policy, that area? Is that how it works?
in. Well, I think in some ways, brought you at that was a function of the types of questions and applications that I was most interested in. I
Mm.
think somebody could have just as well done a master's or even a PhD with a clear goal toward returning to the private sector and
Mm.
solving purely sort of private market business problems. But for me, it was because I was interested in more publicly oriented problems of environment and problems around sort of safeguarding the public good, that I tended to focus more on the policy process, and how could a skill set like economics that I really enjoyed practicing inform that.
Mhm. Mhm. Tell us a little bit more about the practice part of it. Like, what are the skill sets that you're utilizing, like in your day-to-day job? Like, if you have to give a broader picture of the day in the life of an economist, what are some of the things that one should expect to be doing?
Well, I think a key thing is I would be surprised if you would enjoy this type of work without some enjoyment of working with data and
Mm.
using numbers to answer questions. That's a big part of most economists' jobs. There are obviously lots of disciplines and there's a wide variety of what economics in practice looks like, and not all of it involves lots of numbers. But that is a large part of what I have done and what the folks that I work with do, is cultivating data sets that can help you answer problems, and then applying the lens of economics, some of the different tools, whether it be something like econometrics, which to a broader audience looks mostly like statistics of some form or kind to
Mhm.
estimate relationships from data that's been generated over time from the market or otherwise. Or in the type of work that I do, which is simulation modeling, we use data to set up uh, sort of a theoretical representation of how the economy behaves mathematically.
Mhm.
And that generates different results. And we replicate how the economy behaves in terms of how much production is going on throughout the economy, how much pollution is entering the environment as a result. And then we simulate, how that might change with a given policy. So
Mhm.
that type of work involves a lot of computer programming, understanding how the math behind the models works. And so just like that career progression I was just describing earlier, first it's building those two tool sets, getting comfortable doing computer programming, working with data, and then later with
Mhm.
building out that understanding to figure out how can you solve sort of qualitative questions with those tool sets.
Is your core skill set then the tools that you have developed or mastered? And the type of problem you're solving, is that transferable or can that change? For example, you are now focused on environmental economics. Can somebody like that move to a different area? Is that is that
Mhm.
possible? Like, how does that career path work?
I think so. And I think it's easier to do the earlier you are in your career. The tool set is powerful, but it still requires experience and subject matter expertise, the qualitative understanding of the types of problems you face, whether it's in environmental economics or another field, to really set the context and framing for how the tools have been applied and how to interpret what results they're producing. So I think that early on, a lot of what folks find coming out of undergrad is, especially in a consulting environment, you might see a lot of different topics in your topic areas in your day-to-day work, because the primary role is in applying the tools. You have other folks that are maybe more senior that understand the subject matter, have more experience to set the context, saying how tools should be applied, and you can those tools and in the process, get exposure to lots of different topic areas that help you decide which are most compelling to you.
If you look back, even before your undergrad, what drove you to this field, economics? Like, were you in high school more drawn to quantitative things? What kind of students do you think would be really drawn to this or enjoy this field?
Yeah, looking ways back, prior to college, I had a lot of enjoyment from math courses I took. It really had a certain potency to me and had exactness. I just really found the kind of logical aspect of it, that you could come to a right answer, really rewarding. When I got to my undergraduate work, I started an accounting program, and I ended up transferring to economics and finance. I think it was my sophomore year in college. I still remember our Professor Santerre, and learning microeconomics for the first time and seeing him take a very sort of public facing problem about how is a market going to behave and boil it down to very concrete math, and seeing, understanding, learning about derivatives and understanding how you could use those to solve messy sort of problems about how society was behaving was so captivating. And I think that is kind of a bit about my psychology, but I don't think uniquely so. But I would also say, that was my path, but that's of course not the only path through economics. I mean, there are folks that study economic history, for example, people that are more drawn to the societal aspects, different economic systems in theory, that don't have as much of a quantitative thread in their work, but of course are still very much practicing economics and delivering a lot of insight around how society operates.
Yeah, I remember I did take a couple of econometric classes in my business school. So I remember suddenly a problem translating into your equation, right? Now, coming to the education path itself, is it important to have a PhD to be an economist? Is it more common, at least in your field, especially in the research or public sector area?
No, I don't think so. I think there are benefits to a PhD. There are also drawbacks to a PhD. So for folks that are considering, should they go back to school to pursue a PhD? There are a lot of people that will tell you, no, it's a bad idea. Especially if you want to be in the private sector, you get an applied master's degree, build a really good tool set, and go out and apply it and develop your subject matter expertise. There's a large opportunity cost to going through a PhD program because they take years to complete. Those are years that you're not earning income and developing and gaining experience and sort of rising the ranks, so to speak, in your organization. So that's something to weigh carefully. I think on the benefit side of pursuing a PhD, you do get the opportunity to think more deeply, to develop new tools and methods, potentially to think about problems from a different angle. Maybe, hopefully, if you're lucky, in a way that others haven't really thought about a problem before, fresh value to feel that you can then go out and apply. That was my experience, but I'm sure that's not true for everybody. So it really comes down to the individual to really weigh those trade-offs.
Apply economic theory to deciding. Yeah. How does the, from education to getting into workforce work in this area? How do you transition to workforce? Is there any strategies or anything specific that you would recommend?
Yeah. Well, in terms of being on the job market and interviewing, one of the things that, as an interviewer, that I always find most powerful is when people are able to share stories about applying the coursework to a given project. And so a lot of folks will have a capstone course or something where they do a longer form project, and they get to show how they think in ways that apply the tools that they've learned in the strict disciplinary courses. That's where I think you get the opportunity to really add a lot of value. Anybody can learn how a supply and a demand curve work in the basic sense, but understanding How do you create one for a given problem? How
Hmm.
do you apply it to a given question? How do you translate somebody's question into an answer through the use of economic tools? More than that, I think you also, you start to tell a story about how you like to work. Who do you like to work with? In terms of the types of what's going to complement your personality in the workplace,
Hmm.
and what kind of problems are you really good at solving, and what kind of problems do you think are best left to others.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, world is changing at a rapid pace than ever, I feel, or maybe everybody felt that way at that point in society. But right now, it feels like so many changes, right? Just incredible amount of changes, whether it is technology or the politics or everything. What do you think would be some of the important areas where economics will play a big role going forward in the next 5, 10 years? Like, do you have any thoughts on where the students of today, if they're interested in economics, by the time they come into workforce, what will be some of the areas that would be very important for economists to focus on?
Top of my list as an environmental economist is climate change, of course.
Hmm.
And economics has a lot to offer on climate change on both sides of the problem, both on mitigation front, understanding how do we reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we're emitting into the atmosphere,
Hmm.
and how much is it going to cost us to do so over long time spans going into the future, decades. That's a hard problem to answer, and I think it's going to continue to require a lot of ingenuity and creativity from folks that have strong grounding in economics. On the other side of the climate equation, also, what will be the impacts of climate change? What will happen if we don't act swiftly enough? What is, for the climate change that's already sort of baked into the climate system? What kind of damages should we expect going in the future? And how do we put a dollar value on those
Hmm.
damages? And can we, in certain circumstances? There are things that will be very hard to value. That's one area. And then more broadly, outside of the topic area that I focus on, I think looking to what are some of the key drivers of economic growth. That is, where is the economy going to expand to next? And that's,
Hmm.
you can ask 10 economists and get 10 different answers on that question. But really, I think that's an intersection of where do you see a lot of attention and growth, and what's really captivating your imagination. Sustained, whether that's artificial intelligence, technology field, advances in health research. There's a role for economics there. And I think it's really a matter of understanding your core skill sets that happens to be in a field like economics, and then what you're really passionate about. When applying the tools and skill sets you learned in economics are not necessarily the most exciting part of your day. Just never happened for me.
That I can see. I can see. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very fascinating field. Though I will say I did not enjoy the quantitative parts of it as much as I thought I would, but the area is definitely extremely, extremely interesting. Finally, do you have any advice for youngsters who are in maybe high school or undergrad who have economics as a career path on their radar? What would you like to tell them?
Yeah, I think I'll reiterate my last comment about finding that match of the topic areas that you're most passionate about. What do you notice yourself getting excited about that's going on in the world? And then one aspect of, as you're learning more about economics, what do you find you enjoy about the practice? Do you enjoy the math? Do you enjoy solving problems in that way? Do you enjoy large data? Do you want to be somebody who has a data science or econometrics bent to solving problems in that way, observing what's going on in the world and generating insight? Or do you want to take a different direction? A career is a decades long proposition, and it doesn't happen all at once. So that constant awareness and introspection of what is getting you out of bed a little bit earlier each day, or what is sort of keeping your imagination awake at night is really a critical guidepost as you're plotting your course work.
Mhm. Thank you, Jared. Thank you for taking time. One of the fascinating things for me is as I interview my guests, my world is expanding, right? I learn about a new field and then I learn through being connected with them as well. I will keep an eye on all the environmental economic side, the work that you do. And I think you gave a lot of good insights for students who are interested. So thank you so much for taking out time to join me today.
Absolutely. And thank you for doing this work. It's really been nice to get acquainted with some of the interviews you've done, and it's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
That is Jared Woollacott, a senior environmental research economist at RTI International. To learn more about economics and economics careers, please check the description section of the YouTube video. This is Career Calling, and I'm your host, Pratibha Pandit. Thank you for tuning in.